Hello, my name is Dr. Stephen Critchlow. I'm a consultant psychiatrist and I've also been a church pastor. And I'm doing a series of talks on depression, and this is now number 3. And I want to look just briefly at what might cause depression. How, when we think of depression, what are the different causes that we might think about? And I like to break this up into 2 kind of blocks of causes. Now, this is not necessarily a complete look at all the causes of depression. There'll be others that I'm not mentioning. But these are kind of 2 areas that we might think about. The first of those is connected to things that might happen early in our life, in our childhood. And certain things there can affect us in a way. They actually affect our brains, and actually we go on perhaps to have a greater risk of depression if these things are common in our lives. First of all, depression is commoner in some families than others. That we know. We know that there is a genetic component to depression. So some families will struggle with depression much more than others. Also, we know that childhood experience is important. For example, loss of a mother or a father or absence of parents in childhood can have a very damaging effect upon a child. Of course, the experience of physical or sexual abuse is going to have a very marked effect as well. Sometimes parents show that they're overprotective or non-caring, and that difficulty in parenting again can affect the child. And personality also comes into it. For example, those who tend to be very anxious or perfectionistic or prone to obsessions, it can be a factor in perhaps later life depression. So those are things that can affect us as children. And they do have subtle effects on the brain, which I'll discuss in a later talk. So those are things that can actually happen to us in depression. And they can, in a sense, be those factors that might cause depression to be more likely later on. Now, of course, it doesn't mean that if you've been through these things, you will get depressed. What it means is there's a bit of more likelihood if you've been through these areas. And then often in the time before depression comes, there are often major loss factors in our lives. And some of these losses are very stressful. They're very stressful events. So, for example, I will have had people in hospital who've been bereaved from their husband or their partner, and they cannot cope with this loss, and they get very depressed. Also, loss through a job or finances or home or some other very significant loss in life can be very important to people and can be a stressful event that can then lead on to depression. Loss of good health is a common thing. I remember one man whose eyesight was going, and again he became very depressed because he couldn't cope with the loss of his eyesight. Sometimes people go through situations where they feel trapped. For example, a woman at home with 3 or more young children who cannot cope with that situation and has no confidant, no one to turn to. Again, depression in that situation can come on. Sometimes people cannot cope with a very rapid change in life, a rapid change of events. They're moving job, they're moving house, maybe someone has died in the family. They're really struggling with that aspect of their lives. Too much is happening too quickly, and they cannot cope with that. Of course, we know that also people really struggle in their lives in different ways. And this is what somebody in the Old Testament went through. This is the Old Testament character Job, who went through some very difficult times in his life. And this is what he goes through. And this is what he cries out in the midst of his pain. He says, "Let the day perish on which I was born, and the night which said, a boy is conceived. May that day be darkness. Let not God above care for it, nor light shine on it." And here he's going through a very, very difficult time. But once again, as I've mentioned before, he's crying out to God in the midst of his pain. And that is something we can do. No matter what situation we're going through in life, we can, as it were, cast all of our cares on God, because he does care about us. And in the midst of our pain and the midst of our difficulty, we have a God who loves us and cares for us.